Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Hannah Wallen of the Honey Badger Brigade. We had a bit of a false start there, so sorry about that. But how are you doing today, Hannah?
Seems like I brought my technical difficulties with me. Like that's it. That's the rule is technical difficulties with the Badgers. But I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. We were just talking about your involvement with the men's rights movement prior to getting involved with the GamerGate conversation.
Yes, yes. I've been doing this for a while. I talk about family court issues, due process issues, and a lot of different issues in regarding gender differences and stuff, men's health, men's mental health, male suicide, um, and different things about how different treatment of men in the legal system affects men in the world and different treatment of men at work and so on. One of the things that we talk about and have been talking about for a long time is the female invasion of male spaces, men's hobbies, men's workplaces, men's interests, and it ends up being like women see from the outside men doing great things, fun things, interesting things, bonding, being close, and then want to be involved. But then when they get into the environment, they don't try to understand what men are doing, and they don't understand the environment. They don't understand the way men do things because it's not necessarily the same way that women do things. So then they try to change everything and try to make the environment gynocentric so they can be comfortable. And it ends up taking away from those environments. And it is before Gamergate, before the whole Gamergate controversy, um, we were talking about that in regard to both video game environments and tabletop gaming. I'm an old tabletop gamer. So I was kind of talking about that as well in the men's rights subreddit, and uh, and then we started seeing discussion on Twitter about the Zoe post, and that got banned on Reddit real fast. Um, then and a lot of other sites, but it was allowed on Twitter, and that's kind of how we got involved. Was we just kind of continued the discussion including that, and then including the journalism reaction. And it was interesting to see how uh, gamers sort of woke up to the controlling way that journalists treat people. And so that was kind of our foray into it, was seeing something that we'd sort of seen happen in regard to our discussions and our issues that we'd been talking about expand into gaming as part of that female invasion of male spaces.
So you view the GamerGate saga through this gendered lens of like women invading men's spaces?
Quite a bit. Yeah. It's not that there weren't female gamers and then all of a sudden there were, because there were always like I when I started in high school, like 1987 or so. I wasn't the only girl that I ran into who was, a player of tabletop games. And my generation, we played video games together for fun when we were kids. I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up with the Atari system and Odyssey and television and Pong. um, Games on computers and stuff, and it was something that we did together for fun. But over the years, guys got more interested in it, and they got interested in it more frequently than girls did. And so you had the space was definitely a male dominated space, and characteristics that are more frequently found in guys, the get good characteristic, I guess you could say, the desire to do things because they're hard and to conquer them, because it's hard to conquer them. That that is a lot more common in men than women, and that. sort of as a dominant characteristic in both tabletop and um, video gamers. You know, you kind of have to want to do that in order to want to puzzle out either the challenges in a video game or the scenarios in a tabletop game. And so it did become a thing where in the 90s when I was in college and thereafter there weren't as many girls involved until you know you'd see as tabletop gaming sort of progressed and you'd see more editions coming out, then more girls would want to get involved as it was less imagination oriented and more rules oriented. I saw more girls wanting to get involved, and you can see more girls at gaming conventions and stuff. But there was this, I noticed sort of late 90s, there was this tendency of girls to come in and demand a change of environment. Like, don't play this way, don't say these things, don't use this kind of language because I'm here. And it's definitely a gender difference in attitudes. Guys will deal with each other's differences, and they'll handle um, shit talk. They'll handle being rough. They'll handle scenarios in games that would be really upsetting or uncomfortable in real life. But remembering that it's just a game and you're puzzling out a scenario, it's more of a thought exercise, so they're not upset about it. And a lot of times, girls and women will internalize that, and instead of recognizing, hey, this is fiction, it's not really happening, or that shit talk is part of competitiveness. They take things personally. They get upset. They sort of get narcissistic about it, and then you have conflict and demands for limitations to be placed on how people play. And I think it damages the environment when you do that. And if girls want to do that, they can create their own groups and do that in their groups. But if there's an existing group with an existing culture and an existing environment, it is, in my opinion, is kind of hateful toward men to come in and say, "Well, you're wrong for doing it this way, and now that I'm here, you have to do it my way."
So
So,
you've said yourself that women have played games for decades. I've
mhm,
known women who played games since I was a kid. I know plenty of female gamers who I've interviewed for this project. Um, most of them don't seem to be, especially like trying to force their way on everyone else. What
right,
makes you think that
right.
this is a gendered phenomena?
Because I've watched it change over the years. With you see the older generation, like those of us that had sort of been there the whole time, or been there for our whole lives. Um, we really didn't have that issue. But then you got this generation of girls that were influenced by feminism in education, in particular in college, but even in high school, and sort of myths about gaming, like the idea that it's not a common female pastime, and that these environments are female deserts. There's no women involved, and this sort of the stereotype of the nerdy male gamer. And so when they would take an interest in gaming, they would sort of act like they were the first girls to ever have any interest in this. And honestly, the behavior where they come along and, well, if you do this, it's misogynistic. You have to have these X cards so that if I'm offended by something you do, that I can put this down, and you have to change what you're doing. And all of the complaints about um, different types of armor and cheesecake and comic images of different types of like fantasy comic books, like when you see Red Sonja drawn in a chainmail bikini, for instance. all of that is complaints alleging sexism, misogyny, um, failure to tolerate women's sensibilities, and so on. And when we saw the the gamers are dead posts and
Well, the Red
the
Zonia thing. Hang
reaction,
on, that was the Death
yeah,
Trap dungeon.
I believe
Wasn't
so.
that Christian nationalists or Christian fundamentalists who tried to push that?
No, 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 no,
This was the
no.
90s. I don't think
The
feminists cared about anything back then.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's
Not
that
about
was
games.
yeah, that was there were already women doing that. There were already women having those kind of objections, and there were already women, there were already feminists, sort of, they weren't as organized about it, but there were already feminists sort of stepping in and saying, well, I'm part of this group now. You can't do this. You can't do that.
Well, so
You know,
let's back that up then. Um, the Red Sonja thing. Do you have like sources on it being feminists who did this?
mm-mm.
Because I couldn't find anything on this backlash really at all, other than the fact that the developers quietly changed it.
Yeah, but that's not the only instance of that. I mean, you see that talked about on in various forums, various groups, and it wasn't just like I have heard before from other people that it's only Christians that got upset about things like skimpy bikini armor and cheesecake and stuff like that. But that happens a lot where something is deemed misogynistic, something is deemed sexist toward women, and Christians will pick up on it and they'll take action on it, but the discussion doesn't start with them. Now, the Satanic Panic was totally Christians, but that was well, I mean, I guess you could call Al Gore and his wife Christians. But that was a different, that was more a moralistic thing in regard to like violence and bad language and influencing
Well,
kids to
and
not be Christian and stuff like
sexuality
that.
as well, like
Yeah,
Night
and
Trap.
yeah, influencing people to become like promiscuous and stuff like that. But when it comes to the narrative about exploitation of women and everything, you have sites like the Mary Sue, you have different YouTube channels with feminists talking about it. You have the feminist subreddits talking about it. And for that matter, there's one men's rights subreddit responding in the men's rights subreddit to things that we'd seen on the 20 or 30 feminist subreddits, where like if you go in and respond to things that are posted in those subreddits, if you go into those subreddits and respond to things that are posted in those subreddits, you get banned. So a lot of that we didn't go in and have discussion with them in their subreddits. But all of those areas were areas where the discussion wasn't about morality in terms of well, people are going to engage in unwise sexual behaviors because they see a drawing of a woman in a chainmail bikini. It was this is exploitation, this is misogyny, this is what men think of women, blah blah blah. And it was, this makes women unwelcome in comics, this makes women unwelcome in gaming, and this armor is just too unrealistic, it couldn't possibly protect you, as though all of the stuff that you um, learn about magic and stuff in gaming, and how it's supposed to work within the rules of the game, there's no way to magically come up with an armor that, say, doesn't cover your whole body but protects like it does, like rings of protection and bracers and things like that. Um, but it's not something that, like, I'm not going to be able to give you a uh, necessarily a source, because what I'm talking about is widespread discussion, not an event that happened once and is remembered forever.
Well, the Red
But
Sonja thing. I'm a source for that because I've
yeah,
actually looked into this controversy, and I couldn't find a whole lot actually. This was a few weeks ago. I looked into it.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't see anything indicating that it was like feminist groups demanding it be taken out, though.
No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about just that controversy. That's an example.
Okay, so these people have a worldview.
Mhm.
It's you could call it a feminist worldview. That's probably like not quite right because like it's a certain segment of feminism, like this sort of sex negative viewpoint, um, that isn't shared by everybody, including other like feminist critics like Liana Kurzner, or like a social justice ideology or whatever you want to call it. But you view this through like a gendered lens, though. You view it as like a man versus woman kind of issue. When isn't it really? I mean, like most of the people opposed to GamerGate, it seems, are men. Gamergazi, their own forums, I believe it's like 70% men. So it doesn't seem like this is like a gendered
Well,
issue so much as it is
feminism actually.
a shitty person issue or a bad ideology issue.
Well, feminism includes a lot of men. We in fact, probably one of the most insidious feminist men that I've dealt with is not even involved. But we had quite a bit of heckling from a guy called Takes Down MRAs who he likes to do the thing of spouting feminist narratives, spouting feminist actual ideology, giving feminist sources for his claims about us and about various issues and so on, and then saying, "But I'm not a feminist," which is bull because everything that he says comes from feminism. But the narrative that, for instance, the controversy over Zoe Quinn and the coverage that she received and how she got her game greenlighted and so on. And I do use the term game loosely because I've seen it and I don't define walking simulators as games. But in any case,
Well, it's a
all of
twine.
that,
It's twine. It's not a walking simulator.
huh?
It's twine. It's not a walking simulator. It's more like a choose your own adventure text thing.
Well, it choose your own adventure indicates that when you make different choices, the same thing doesn't happen, and so you get an adventure. And just the what I saw of it, your choices all led to the same outcome. So like you had the pathway might start out wider and just narrow down. So you had choices that you could make that should help your character overcome the depression, but instead, you make the choice and it's like, well, this doesn't work. And I've seen that with other feminist games. There was one that we investigated called the Day the Laughter Died, that was supposed to communicate essentially that um, yeah, it's it's not consent if a girl engages in sexual activity with a guy because she's too shy to tell him no, like that's his fault. And it really, we went through it and it was very melodramatically made, and it was another game like that where you had a variety of choices you could make, but they all led to the same outcome. And they all defined that outcome as rape, even though at every point in the game you had the opportunity to walk away. You had the opportunity. They were all scenarios where you would have the opportunity to make different choices, and in real life, those would have different outcomes. Like saying no would have a different outcome, and at no point do you get to do that. It takes it away from you. I even made a video making fun of that, um, where I used being fed cake by a guy as the comparison, and all of the objections took place in my head, which is what happened in the game. And the whole time I'm just lamenting that I'm being fed this cake against my will, but I never say a word of objection or try to stop eating the cake. And the developer of the game had written a post objecting to the video. I went back looking for it not too long ago, that post, because we were talking about something and I wanted to reference it, and it's gone. There's not even an archive of it. So, but the game's still there. Um, and like that blew my mind.
So I
But
want to go ahead.
But yeah, when we looked at that and we saw that, we saw the discussion around it, all of the social justice side of it, all of the defenses of Quinn and her legitimacy and the behavior that she, like her treatment of her ex and everything, they all revolved around you have to tolerate this because she's a woman. You only hate her because she's a woman. You're only objecting to this because she's a woman. This is slut shaming. And none of it was, uh, just your criticisms of this are illegitimate because it's good. It's got quality. It's well done or anything like that. It was all, if you don't accept this, you're a misogynist.
In
And that
regards
is
to
a
the Zoe
feminist
post,
narrative. Yes. In regards to no, if you in regards to the game, and the Zoe post was deemed abuse, even though it was an abuse victim complaining about the abuse that he experienced.
yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think most of the people who don't like GamerGate actually haven't even read the Zoe post. I didn't even read it until like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah. I had to read it for the book. But no, I mean, I'm like, I guess like fairly sympathetic with Joni. But I do want to talk about like so you say that women are coming into the space and they're changing it in ways that you think are bad. Um, it just seems kind of weird to frame things this way. Like we could get into like specifics of what exactly you've already talked about, like conventions. Like again, competitiveness. I don't understand. Obviously there might be like differences between men and women in regards like what the average woman or the average man, like the types of games they're going to gravitate towards, the types of competitive play styles that they're going to gravitate towards,
Right.
etc. There could be like average differences here. I wouldn't deny that. And I think it's like borne out by like who's buying what games. Like The Sims are more female dominated, and Animal Crossing is probably more female dominated. Final Fantasy I think is like 50-50 almost. And like Call of Duty and Halo are probably more male dominated from my understanding of the demographics. So like there's gonna be like different games that appeal to different types of people, and are marketed towards different types of people, and are going to be played mostly by those types of people. And part of that could
Mhm.
be marketing. Part of it could be just that people are naturally inclined towards certain things on average. But why is it like illegitimate for like why would men have a claim to the gaming space in general? I would say first.
Well, I'm not saying that men have a claim to the gaming space. What I'm saying is they're already there. So, for instance, you have, um, let's say you have a game that is popular already with men, like something that has been. We'll make up a game, so I'm not flagging anything in particular. But I don't know, a game based on Fahrenheit 451. Let's say that where you play the storyline as the fireman, learning, um, the uh, drawbacks of the society that he's living in, and becoming part of the society of people who choose to be living books. Right, he goes through the whole story, and each series, each section, maybe you'd have puzzles where you're dealing with something difficult, and you get to the part where in the story, for people who haven't read Fahrenheit 451, there's one of the details that Bradbury included in the story is your house has one wall that is a giant TV screen, and it's funny that it was predicted because TV screens are now flat and they go up on the wall and they're getting bigger and bigger, and we now even have projectors where you can just project television. And he predicted interactive television as well, and how formulaic it would be. Um, where we have call-in television where people call in their votes for things. But in the story, um, the the female character that's watching the television is watching because you had to send your information in and you get included by name in the show that you're watching. And she was just all enchanted by this. And the fireman, I can't remember his name, was kind of disgusted by it and saw it as a brain dead kind of thing to do. That she's just totally taken in by this, and it it's a distraction from noticing what's going on in real life around her, and it's more interesting to her than real life. Sort of takes away from her engagement with him and everything. And so you get to that part in the fictional game that I have made up. We would see, and we've seen this in real games, but we would see women come along and say, "That's misogynistic. You can't have stuff like that in the game." Or let's say the character was designed to look visually appealing, and I don't remember whether her outfit was described, but let's say it was a highly attractive outfit, in attractive by conventional standards. Um, that would get objected to. If she was portrayed as unattractive by conventional standards and it was associated with her um, lack of intellectual uh, motivation, that would also get objected to, and it would also be called misogynistic, even though those stereotypes are also portrayed about men who are unattractive or obese or anything like that. So you'd have this situation where, because the character is female, if there's anything uh, that other women might look at and take as she's better than me, they would object and call it misogynistic because it's an unrealistic portrayal of women. But if there was anything about her that made her to be an objectionable character, anything that associated objectionable characteristics with any kind of stereotypical, you like the fat and lazy stereotype, or the ugly and cantankerous, ugly and um, not fun to be around personality uh, combination stereotype, uh, and they'd say, well, that's because she's a woman, and it's misogynistic. And then there would be a push to change the character. Um, Even if it was canon to the story, there would be a push to change the character. And we've seen this with different games where, say, a character that in the original game has skimpy clothing, the clothing has to be changed to satisfy the female contingent, not because anybody's harmed by the availability of the skimpy clothing, or the portrayal with the skimpy clothing, but because it's objectionable to them. Or if you have, a character that is particularly curvy, and the complaint, where are her organs, gets thrown all over the place. And the next game in the series, the developers are pressured to change the physical appearance of the character, and there have been characters that have been changed because of this in different games.
Yeah, again,
And you
we can talk about like how they criticize works, these people, and what their like opinions are and how we can respond to those opinions.
right,
But I do take issue, and again, I'm still not sure why you're framing it in this gendered way, though. You say a woman, the female contingent, and you say that women are infiltrating and invading men's spaces. Like this isn't like, well, this isn't you making a specific claim, right? You're not saying that like, okay, women have started playing Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, and because of this, they've toned down the sexiness. Like, that's not what you're claiming, right? You're claiming that women are infiltrating the gaming sphere. That's a very different kind of claim and a very broad claim. It'd be like me saying like black people are infiltrating my suburb, right?
Well, no, that's not the claim. But it's I don't know how if I can get you to understand this. Because
Try.
like I said, I'm not saying that women were not there before, right? And I'm not because I was there and I'm female and have been all my life. Contrary to the constant barrage of sex changes I get on Twitter from women who think that a woman can't think the way that I think. But no, it's not that women are invading as into an area where there were no women. It's not that overt of a takeover, right? And it's not that overt of a phenomenon. It's more of a you have to do things our way phenomenon, and it's a very slow process. And it's not. I'm not even sure that I would necessarily call it organized, to the degree of like some conspiracy where there's a planning room, women sitting around going, "How can we take over this space?" But more in terms of there is a tendency, there is a habit, and it's a majority behavior among females as opposed to males, where when you walk into an environment, um, men will acclimate to the environment, and some women will acclimate to the environment, and most men and some women, um, but some men and most women will expect the environment to adjust for them. And it's particularly in terms of their attitude toward behaviors that are viewed as gendered in interactions between the sexes. And it's not just games and gaming that we've seen this with. For instance, are you familiar with the elevator gate controversy?
Only vaguely. Rebecca
From
Watson?
Yes. So she's part of the skeptic community, right? And this is a prime example. Skepticism is basically just when you're engaging in skepticism right now. When you hear a claim, you want to see evidence of it before you condemn something or change your mind about something, make decisions about something, change your life and your actions about something. Um, it's sort of gotten hijacked by the idea of atheism, where like you're not a skeptic if you're not an atheist, and atheism is the only kind of skepticism. Well, there's skepticism regarding all kinds of other things, and of course, the claims about spirit and spirituality, ghost goblins, things that go bump in the night, the ghost hunters and stuff like that. There's skeptics about that. There's skeptics about and any claim that is made where people are asked to take an action or do a thing. Um, you know, everything from different new claims in medicine to claims about human interaction to you know anything, right? And so the skeptic community sort of exists to talk about all of that stuff, and that includes like social justice and everything. But women in the skeptic community had to have their own little special female space, and so the skeptics was formed. You had these women that sort of banded together as we are the female skeptics, and there's a tendency in a community that women seem to become the bigger celebrities. If there's celebrity within the community, they seem to become the social center, and it's probably
Well,
because
hang
women are
on.
social
Aren't like
organizers.
all of the biggest streamers and YouTubers in the world men, pretty much? Like most of them?
Yeah, yeah. But you end up getting this like you don't necessarily have to be I don't think there's anything remarkable about Rebecca Watson, for instance. So you get asked to speak on stuff like this, on skepticism or anything like that, and you get taken seriously without doing the labor that the men did. And I even saw this in the men's rights movement. Like it's I when I first got involved in the men's rights movement, my name on Reddit was Onero's Grip. And I didn't come in with, "Hi, I'm a girl. Listen to me." I just talked about stuff I'd experienced and seen in my life, and the case that I had sort of shown up to that I ended up looking into the Violence Against Women Act because of it, and the information that I was trying to convey about that. And so, I kind of got known, but not super well known. And then, sort of people found out I was female, and all of a sudden, 2 things happened. Um, it was remarkable that I was saying the things I was saying, and every feminist on Twitter wanted to, change my mind, or every feminist on, Reddit wanted to change my mind. Suddenly I was on David Futrell's radar, um, he's a blogger
We
who
hunted the
his
mammoth.
whole shtick is, yeah. And his whole shtick is hating on men's rights activists and sort of demonizing men, right? And so when the elevator gate thing happened, I started looking at the skeptics, and I noticed the same kind of thing. Um, their their respect that they get is because they're women. It's not because they're great skeptics. Whereas the respect that a lot of the men get is because uh, they've said highly intelligent things, or they've made great arguments, which again are highly intelligent things, but great arguments that people have found useful, that people have taken forward, and they'll reference things they've written, or they'll reference things they've said. Um, One difference that I've noticed in the men's rights movement is people will actually reference things that the women in the movement have said, and that's it's. I probably would have walked away if it turned out to be just like the skeptics. And there is a group of gals that started a lady MRA's subreddit, and I never really found it worth participating in that because all of the discussion of men's issues was really in the men's rights subreddit, and that's what I was doing, so that's where I was.
I mean, your group is
Um,
though like women MRAs, right? The honey badgers, like that's a very specific
well, I mean,
thing.
Brian's not a woman. He's
You
very
do
much
allow
not a woman.
men to
Mike's
participate
not
as well,
a
sure.
woman.
But you like,
We're
but like the
there's
branding
probably
I don't know about the branding you use specifically, but I know that it's like widely considered. In fact, your Wikipedia even says female MRAs is what Honey Badger stands
yeah,
for.
yeah. Well,
Though
there's a
Wikipedia is
story
not like a
behind
great
that
source,
too.
so I'm not
I
like
know,
I'm just saying like
but
that's.
there is a story. Yeah, there's a story behind that as well. And the Honey Badger Brigade was kind of like Not Your Shield before Not Your Shield. So you have women would come into in particular, and then also male feminists in particular, but not. We didn't really see a lot of men who weren't feminists doing this. Would come into the men's rights subreddit and start um, shaming the men there, like to the degree that at one point, I don't know if I still have it or not. I used to have a screenshot of a post where someone came in and lectured everybody in the subreddit. What would your mothers think of the way that you talk in here? And in a subreddit where abused men, male victims of sexual violence, men who have been reamed by the court system, men who have been victims of false allegations and stuff, have banded together and talked about, what can we do about our particular situation. I'm here because X happened to me. What do I do? And this shaming thing comes in, right? Um, Shoot, I lost track of what I was
Well, we
saying.
can return to GamerGate since that's the focus
Well,
of the
yeah,
interview.
yeah. But in any case, like all of that sort of revolved around, how dare you talk about women this way? right? And so you go back to the skeptics and um oh, it was the honey badger thing. You wanted to know what the honey badger thing was about. Well, there were those of us that were female that were in the subreddit sort of came back and said, "This is not offensive to women. It's not offensive to women to recognize that women can do bad things. It's offensive to act like women uniquely can't do bad things because then it
Well,
acts like that's our actions don't matter."
I mean, I'm not like an offense person. I don't give a shit. But
Yeah.
like, it probably is offensive though when you're like trying to say that women are taking over our hobby.
Well, again, this is it's kind of a mischaracterization of the
Well,
point
let me ask you:
that I was making, but
is your
in any case, the
I'm trying not to steal straw man you. I swear. Your position though is though that men were more prevalent in the gaming community over the past several
when
decades.
I was a kid,
Yeah, when you were a kid,
yeah,
when I was a kid, probably, and probably
yeah.
still to this day. At least if you're not talking about like mobile games. If you're talking about like AAA
Well, mobile
titles,
games are a whole different thing.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody plays
If
mobile
you're
games.
talking about
Like,
console and PC, these are like generally more male-dominated spaces, quote unquote, right? And so like, and so you think it's like probably wrong if women have like certain expectations that maybe the space should change to some extent to accommodate them being there, and that like men
yeah,
have the
if
men's preferences take priority because quote
it's
they were
not
there
about
first, right?
preference, it's not just about men's preferences. It's about this environment is created around specific characteristics. The characteristic of competitiveness, or the characteristic of problem solving, the characteristic of doing something because it's hard, the characteristic of enjoying the eye candy. All of those things. And for instance, when you have somebody like Anita Sarkeesian come in and complain that women portrayed in game stories and so on are just eye candy, and then um, complain that Batman's cape won't get out of the way so she can't see his butt. It's like, well, it's okay when women do it, but it's not okay when men do it. It's about demanding that men change everything that they are doing in an environment, and that an environment that men and women were in together, boys and girls were in together, that had a culture and a set of characteristics already, change to suit feminist sensibilities about women, to suit a particular set of what I would consider to be hypersensitivity type characteristics. And that's the same thing that sort of led to the creation of the honey badgers in the men's rights subreddit. There's a discussion on A Voice for Men, um, where some of the guys were talking about, they considered it very special that there were women that would step up and contradict that behavior, where you have men and women in an environment. Discussion is already taking place, activity is already taking place, a culture exists in that environment, with norms and inside jokes and standard practices, ways that people relate to each other already in that culture. And women with the feminist victim mentality will come in, or feminist men even will come in and shame the people within that culture, on behalf of women. And when women stand up and say, "Don't do that. You're not representative of us. We
So
don't feel that way about it. And by the way, they're right about X, Y, and Z." Um, that they considered that to be a layer of thicker skin and a style of observation, and in a way, social skepticism that is kind of rare. And I agree that it's kind of rare, both in men and women. But in particular, if a woman is hypersensitive about how women are talked about, or how women are viewed, or how the other women in her environment look or talk or whatever, or how men and women interact in an environment, um, she's considered normal. It's not treated like in in general, like it's an attack on anybody or a bad behavior, or I don't like the term bad, but an unacceptable behavior. And so when women um, resist that, when women push back against that, it's considered a different level of, or a different style of toughness. And especially, like, there's a behavior that happens with, and again, I will blame feminists for this right off, because it's almost always people who have openly identified themselves as feminists that target us with this. But as soon as they discover that a woman is not on board with the shaming of men for having any kind of behavior that's feminist disapproved, then they start with behaviors that they would call misogynistic if men did it to them. They, like, I've seen everything from assuming we're ugly and we're only in there for attention, and that we're all old maids that can't get a man, and so on, or men pretending to be women, to telling us that we should experience different types of violence so we would know what they were like. Like, there isn't a type of violence that feminists talk about that I haven't experienced, except one. Like, I've never been a victim of incest, but um, it's bizarre watching that happen. And we've several of us have been doxxed. Several of us have been.
Well, do you know who's
Uh,
done this?
um, oh no, the guy that doxed those of us that have Voice for Men went by a Voice for Men dox on Twitter, and we never did find out his identity. Um, Now, David Futrell sort of idiot doxed me. I don't know how else to put this. I used to go by Della Burton instead of Hannah Wallen, uh, up until I think I switched in 2014 or 2015. The case that I was involved in, I came to the men's rights movement to talk about my experiences as a witness in a false allegation case that went on for 7 years, and what I learned and some of the tools that men could use if they are subject to the same kind of malicious prosecution and vexatious litigation that I saw my friend go through. And I went by Onero's Grip on Twitter, or on Reddit, and I went by Gloria Sass on A Voice for Men until they asked me to start writing for them, and I wanted a name that wasn't going to sound like a gag name, because that's a gag name. And um, I didn't want my identity known at the time, because the I don't know what her job title is called. I can't think of. They didn't use the job title that's listed in the Violence Against Women Act, but there's an advocate that accompanied the vexatious litigant in that case to court. She sat with her in court and was kind of like a watchdog for her. And then there were two other ladies that were there with
Well,
her
this isn't
that
especially
accompanied her.
GamerGate related though.
Well, here's the gist of it. They threatened to report my family to Child Protective Services for me being there. So I was anonymous until like somewhere around 2014 to 2016. And I came out on Blog Talk Radio under my real name when my kids were old enough that you could report me to Child Protective Services all day and nothing would happen, because they aged out, right? They were adults. And a few weeks later, David Futrell had this big reveal on his website, on his We Hunted the Mammoth, that I was actually Hannah Wallen and not Della Burton. So it was sort of intending to dox, but it wasn't a dox because I'd already shared that information myself, right? But a Voice for Men dox that doxed several of us, like that account was anonymous. My last 5 addresses were published and left up on Twitter. Jack Barnes, his daughter's kindergarten address was published and left up for 3 days. The police had to contact Twitter to get that taken down, right? And so the Honey Badger thing, that came out of a discussion about that kind of behavior and not scaring us away, not changing our minds, not falling prey to that. And the guys at A Voice for Men were trying to figure out, what to call that in a woman. And one of the regulars there, Dr. Tara Palmatier, who goes by a Shrink for Men, referenced the crazy nasty ass Honey Badger video, and that's where her name came from. So is to go back to how that's related to Not Your Shield. When the GamerGate controversy happened, and we had social justice warriors coming in and shaming people, talking about the dishonesty in journalism, the fact that news stories were being or ads were being portrayed as news stories, the fact that the controversy over um, Zoe Quinn's uh, actions, I guess, and the actions of the journalists in regard to her, and how what she opened the door to, and everything. They basically were trying to shame people on the hey, we want some honesty side of Gamergate as misogynistic, homophobic, um, anti-disability, and so on. And it was the same kind of situation, same kind of progress, same kind of people coming forward with, no, you don't represent us. Stop talking on our behalf. Just because, we're female, or just because we're, gay, or just because we're in a wheelchair, just because all of that doesn't necessarily mean that people can't have these discussions. You're not, we're not your shield for these attacks on this effort at, trying to eliminate the dishonesty in games journalism, and eliminate the sort of sneakery, the ads posing as real stories, and the trying to shame people into um, being preached at in games, instead of having games that are just about doing fun things and interesting things, right?
So Anita Sarkeesian has opinions that you don't like. So what? Like, what's the issue here?
Oh, the issue there is that she does exactly the same thing that a lot of race grifters do. It's a nice company you have there. It'd be a shame if it got boycotted. Why don't you change what you're doing in this company so that I'm happy with what you're doing? It doesn't matter what your
How often has
consumers
Anita
like.
Sarkeesian threatened to boycott games?
Are you serious?
Well, let's go through the list.
Did you Were you there for the? I thought you were part of the GamerGate discussion when
I
it was
was very
happening.
much so. I don't remember her ever advocating for a boycott of games.
Oh my gosh. Her whole grift was about organizing people to contact game. What do you think they were doing?
Her specifically?
Do you think all she did was make YouTube videos?
But you think that what was she specifically doing that you thought was bad?
Good grief. All right. So when we first came across Anita Sarkeesian, she was in discussion with Nintendo. She was in discussion with like all of I can't name a game company she wasn't in discussion with. She had already come out with the claim that she'd gotten threats online, and raised her $400,000 based on nothing, because what she got at best could be called threatoids, right? But
Well, I don't know about her specific threats in 2012. I've not researched like that whole area, but
oh, it, it's the same kind of thing that we experienced. I wish this would happen to you, or you should experience this so you know what it was like, or somebody made a game where you beat up a facsimile of Anita Sarkeesian, which like I mean you can make a game where you beat somebody up and it's has no effect on them whatsoever. Nothing happens to the individual. That doesn't mean somebody's going to come to their house and beat them up and they're not getting real bruises because their image is being bruised on the screen. It's insulting, but who cares, right?
so
Uh,
she's talking with Nintendo. She's talking with all these companies. She's allowed to
right,
do that.
and
She's a free
influence,
person.
right, and influencing them, right. But the influence isn't um, on behalf of the community. It's it's more on behalf of herself, and it's on behalf of her personal moralistic viewpoints.
Yeah,
And
she's allowed to do that though.
yeah, nobody's saying she's not allowed to do it, but it's still
But
just
that's
because
not the
you're
same
allowed to,
as
just
that's
because you have
not.
the freedom to do something doesn't mean it's not shitty, and it doesn't mean it's not an attack on the
So she
community.
goes to Nintendo, or Nintendo goes to her, and they want her feedback for their
Well, no, they
products.
they didn't go to her.
Or she goes to them. Okay, so what? They
Yeah,
agreed
she
to
goes to them.
consult. They let her consult for them. Not Nintendo
Yep.
specifically, I don't think, but like other companies. Again,
Right,
she's
right.
allowed
They
to do
agreed.
this.
So if I come to you and I tell you that I'm going to make you look bad, and that it's going to affect your business and you're going to lose a lot of money if you don't do what I say, and I demonstrate a following that basically is big enough that I can get $400,000 out of it just for saying that I was a victim of being called names and being complained about on the internet, and you feel like you not doing what I want is going to be detrimental to your business outlook, not because I'm right, but because I have the power to do harm to your business.
So
Um,
what are some
then
examples of her
is
saying
that
this?
how is that not blackmail?
Well, when has she said that? That
Well, can
if you
you
don't hire me, if you don't consult for me,
before I answer that, can you acknowledge that that is blackmail?
if she specifically said that, I mean, I don't know I don't know what the legal definition of blackmail is, but like it's extortionary to some extent, yes.
Yeah, that's extortionary. All right. So now, if I'm not direct about it, but I go in with this narrative that includes a lot of shaming language, and I still demonstrate that level of power, right? And I go in with the language of establishment. So you have behind people like Anita Sarkeesian, you have the entire feminist establishment of uh, gender studies in universities, teaching women and girls that if they can be victims of being looked at. You have the feminist journalist establishment. You have the feminist lobbying establishment within government, and you have the establishment of feminist organizations, which are heavily funded. And this is again something that people don't talk about. People don't necessarily notice and understand within a niche like skepticism or gaming or maker spaces or any other hobby or profession, because each one is encapsulated. It's its own space. It's its own discussion. But you have all of these things as the vehicle that she's driving in, the tank that she's driving in. And we're not just talking about an individual with comments on the internet coming in. We're talking about an individual bringing in decades of feminist academic writing that is all based on self reference and if you actually take the time to take it apart, which takes hours and sometimes even years, you discover that it's not based on anything but allegation. There's not any substance behind it. But it's already been used to change law and policy. It's already been used to change policy in the business world. It's already been entrenched in the university system as an area of study, of academic study, and it's already been entrenched to the degree that that area of academic study has branched out into other areas of academic study. So you have it being taught in business school, you have it being taught in um, the the profession of psychology in medical school. You
Well,
have it being taught
let's
and all that,
bring
right?
it back to
She
me
comes
though.
in with that into your company, and as a representative of that, speaks with authority. And as soon as you contradict her, you have the threat of every journalist that is in the feminist establishment coming down on you, condemning you. And they may even start by writing about how sexist these games are, or how there's a sexism problem in gaming. There's
Well,
a sexism problem in your industry. And then along comes Anita Sarkeesian. Oh, I can save you. And again, is that consensual at that point, where you've had this huge bear trap of allegations, of imputations, of um, social manipulation,
so
followed by this savior coming in and saying, hey, do what I say and change things the way that I tell you to change them, and you'll be okay.
okay, so your view, and correct me if I'm wrong, your view is that Anita Sarkeesian goes to these companies, or maybe sometimes they approach her, and they feel like, you know what, let's just go ahead and pay her to consult for us because there's a lot of social pressure for us to do something along those lines.
No,
Anita
my view
Sarkeesian
is that
has
she goes to them because she has a lot of social power, not that there's a lot of social pressure. Social pressure indicates that the public agrees with her.
I mean, some of the public do.
Not very many. Most of what she got came from organizations, right? Not individuals. So the
Well, her
social
whole
social
Kickstarter, right,
pressure,
was to specifically to create a YouTube series.
yeah, her whole Kickstarter may have been to create a YouTube series, but the reality is that just like organizations like the National Organization for Women, just like the academics that started women's studies, just like the entire field of the entire um, social justice end of human resources and business. The funding for this doesn't just come out of individual pockets. Right? This comes out of organizations. And if you look back on feminist funding, you'll find it traces back to uh, organizations like the Ford Foundation, organizations like big banks, organizations that are
Well, we're not talking about that. We're
more
talking about Anita
political in
Sarkeesian.
nature.
Let's
Yes, and
and I it
if you think that she didn't get the same benefit, right, or funding from organizations like the National Organization for Women that gets their funding
well, it's
from.
a public organization, right? The Feminist Frequency. It's a registered charity. You could probably look up who donates to them, correct?
Mhm,
So, who is donated to Anita Sarkeesian? What are these groups that are backing her? I know Intel did.
yep, Intel did, but they're not alone. Like this is again,
Well, which ones do you think are
this
bad
is
though? Like again, like I want to get like specifics.
it's
If you
not a I'm not saying the organizations are bad. What I'm saying is that this isn't when you say, well, Intel donated to them. So how is that um the gaming community, the the players, right? Gamers. putting pressure on a business.
In what way? You mean because Intel pulled out ads of Gawker?
No, what I'm saying, like, you sort of tried to reframe what I was talking about as just social pressure.
Okay,
The
not social. She's
question is
friends in high places,
social
whatever.
pressure from whom? Right.
Yeah.
There's a big difference, right? If 10,000 nobodies like me say a thing, and you say, well, that's social pressure. That's one thing, right? But if a big and financially powerful organization puts their money behind it, that's not social pressure. That's an
But
individual.
at no point though, it's not non-consensual though.
But it is coercive.
I mean, like to
And
some extent, like all capitalist interactions are coercive.
well, no, that's not true.
Right. Well, we were talking about. Well, if we're talking about if you're talking about companies, especially, I mean not all interactions, but the general through line of the private ownership of the means of production does imply that there
No,
is
that's
yes,
not
because
coercion.
some yes
That
here.
is not coercion. Telling someone they can't steal from you is not coercion.
Well, I'm not talking about stealing. I'm talking about. Well, let's look at employment, right? The person who doesn't work doesn't eat.
And so people not giving you things for free is coercion.
Not giving you things for free, not necessarily, but existing
Okay,
in
but
society.
well, yeah, existing in nobody's stopping you from existing in society, though. So that's the thing. If we're going to get into discussion about communism, I'm going to be really blunt. Communism is coercion,
Well, that's a whole other topic. But
right? No, well, but that's the topic that you just brought up.
well, I'm a
When you
capitalist, so I don't
yes,
see anything wrong with like this
when you
individual has a lot of money and resources, and they also want to consult for video games. And I don't think that
yeah,
that makes the relationship between
it's
them and the
that's not the
publisher to be
problem.
inherently.
That's not the problem. The having a lot of money and resources is not the problem. Wanting to do a thing is not the problem. It's when you go in and you use you use that kind of pressure, you have to deal with me or else, and there's any kind of threat of repercussion to make the companies make it an adverse response or reaction outcome for the companies to not do what you say, not consult with you, not take your consultation and make their changes, even when their own consumers aren't wanting those changes.
Well,
That is definitely not uh, like not just flat out consensual. It's just the same thing as uh, if I came along and said, well, I want to buy your car, and you said, well, my car's not for sale, and I discovered that you had a loan on your car, and I went to your bank and I bought your loan and raised the interest, to a degree that you couldn't make your payments, and then said, "But I'll buy your car." Um, did you sell your car willingly, or did I force you to sell your car?
well, we would have to like look at like what specifically we want to regulate in society. I don't think we're anywhere near like an analogous situation.
And it's very much like that. If you come
Well, what
along
what happens to
and
the people who say no
take
to her? What happens if they say, actually, Anita, turns out that those of us over at Bethesda don't want to hire you to be a consultant, or we don't like your specific advice on this area and we're going to ignore it? What happens to those companies?
Oh, we saw that though. We saw the reaction to GamerGate. We didn't agree with Anita, and what happened is we got demonized, and we got demonized to the degree that we were excluded from things, and we were targeted in not just journalistic media, which I use that term lightly, obviously, but also in entertainment media, and we got kicked out of places. We were targeted with bomb threats when we were in different locations. I didn't get to go to DC, but there that was one of these. In fact, when I've had meetups here that when I do mine, I don't make it exclusively GamerGate or exclusively Men's Rights because of the overlap. I called it the Mixed Up Meetup and just had, and I sent the invite out to people, and people came and we had a gathering and chit chatted and played games together and had a good time. But I specifically picked as my location after our experiences at Calgary, after our experiences watching what happened in DC with the stupid bomb threat that happened there, and then all of the crap that came out after. I chose the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum on the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base because only a complete and utter fool would make a bomb threat or any other kind of threat against the people there. And they wouldn't get away with it if they did it. Whereas, everything that's happened in the past, they've gotten away with.
Like,
But
I think you hit upon like the correct answer earlier, which is that they did, Anita and others did demonize Gamergate and their critics, but like that's like the fundamental problem. I think it's not like this women are trying to take our video games away from us, which is like a very
stop right there.
crude way of framing what you said. But like that's how the media would frame what you said. It like probably wouldn't be like completely unfair either.
Yeah,
But like
it's how the media would frame it, but
but
it's not correct.
but
And
your view
what we
is
were
though that
demonized
women
with.
are that your view is though is that women are coming in to change the gaming space in ways that you think are bad. Right, that is your position.
That is not my position. Right now, my position is that some women are demanding changes, but my position is also that women are being used to make these changes. And again, like I think I've had to say this multiple times in the conversation. This is specifically in regard to feminism. Like there are many of us that were gamers that were non-feminist that never had this problem until women with the feminist victim mentality started noticing and getting involved. Basically, the women that previously would have looked at the guys that I grew up hanging out with, who I felt were interesting and fun people to be around, and looked down on them. And like today, they would have called them incels, even though um, the term has been taken completely out of the realm of its meaning. And they would have been accusing them of being creepy. They would have been accusing them of being nasty and disgusting. They would have, not touched them with a 10-foot pole, but they wanted to be part of that environment anyway. And part of it is trying to get those guys out of there. But in terms of the being excluded thing, what do you think was the reason the Honey Badgers got kicked out of the Calgary Expo?
I researched the case a long time ago. I actually wanted to interview Allison. Were you there?
Yes.
Okay. Because you were supporting Gamergate, essentially. But like I'm sure
No.
they probably didn't like your Honey Badger like MRA stuff too, I'm sure.
We actually got kicked out.
Oh no, ostensibly it was because you had harassed someone at a panel, but this actually wasn't true.
Right.
There's a
We got
recording. I've seen
kicked
the
out.
recording. You didn't do it.
We got kicked out because we support men. We got kicked out because we support men not being shamed for not accommodating all of women's sensibilities. We got kicked out because we support men's right to not be viewed as automatically guilty of wrongdoing because a woman is angry or upset. That's why we got kicked out. Right.
So what?
When we got involved with the GamerGate controversy, the thing that got the Honey Badgers interested was the way the discussion around the reaction to the Zoe post was happening. Right, that post, yes, it was an abuse victim describing the abuse that he had experienced. Yes, it was a guy who had been cheated on, describing the cheating itself and how it affected him. But it opened up the door to backroom dealings that gamers didn't know were going on, right? It opened up an understanding of, when you see a news article that's a review of a game and you base your decision to spend, 2 or 3 days pay or a week's pay or whatever, getting a system or just a game for the system you already have and so on this person's recommendations, they might be lying to you, right? That was the discussion that gamers wanted to have. But what they were getting back is, well, you're just slut shaming this girl. You can't talk about that because you're slut shaming this girl. You can't talk about that because it has to do with this girl's cheating on her boyfriend and it's just a sexual dispute. He didn't own her and blah, blah, blah. We're not talking about him owning her. We're not talking about her sexual exploits. It's not about that. But that became the shield, didn't it?
Yeah, but see, that's if you would have opened with that, it probably would
But
have been more. But
that
you do
is
mix
the
between
entire
you do mix
that
though between like the reasonable take, and then you will make very bold claims about half the population of the Earth.
well, I
Like if
haven't
like
made bold claims about half the
we
population
would
of the earth.
we if
I haven't made claims about all women. That's a see,
you
this is
said
another thing
women
that happens.
invading the space. I mean, like, if I were talking
This is
about that
another
about
thing
any
that
other group, if I were talking about that about black people that way, or white people that way, or men that way, I would also have like an issue with that framing.
here's the problem. When I began talking about this, I pointed out that there were women involved in gaming before excuse me. It's not even allergy season. Why is that happening? Before all of this has happened, right? And I've talked about the fact that it's not all women, but generalizations are not absolute statements. And they get taken as absolute statements when you're talking about women because people have an oversensitivity toward women and overprotectiveness toward women. And it is used to silence criticism of any type of change, like anything Anita Sarkeesian and her ilk demanded. You can't have artwork that is designed specifically to be sexually pleasing to men because it pisses us off. Those kinds of criticisms. Um, it's used to shield those from argument. And that is women. That is on behalf of women, even when the feminists that are coming in and making those demands or shaming you for objecting to those demands are men. They're not doing it on behalf of themselves. They're doing it on behalf of women. They're doing it in response to an ideology of female victimhood, and they're doing it in response to an ideology of, um, a population-wide allegation against men. And it's not a matter of the population women is at war with the population men. Right? It is the population feminists are at war with the ability of men and women to just get along.
The same dynamics though that you talk about regarding the gender stuff, it's no different really when it comes to issues of trans trans issues, or even race
Right.
issues, or any other set of issues. I think the
The race
real
grift
issue
is the
though,
same.
the real
The
issue is
race grift is exactly the same. In
it.
fact, what Anita
So,
Sarkeesian does is what Al Sharpton does. She follows the same formula he does.
but like the issue is that they're closing down the Overton window and shrinking it to exclude people that they don't like. People with a wide variety of viewpoints, people based on their immutable characteristics. I think that like this is like fundamentally the issue that we should be opposing. Like I don't care if Anita Sarkeesian wants to make videos criticizing video games. I don't care if she wants to uh, consult for a company and help them make games the way that she thinks are in line with feminist values or whatever. I might disagree with her and voice that opinion, but the fact that there is not a discussion, there's no room for disagreement and dissent, I think is the issue.
And
And I think it does
but what do you
probably
think? What do
create.
you think gets used to eliminate room for dissent?
Well, of spurious accusations of all sorts of isms and
Right.
yeah, sure, I don't
And
disagree.
what's the start of GamerGate? What spurious accusations were used to shut down debate?
Well, harassment, I guess, would be like the big one. But they would
Spurious
also say
accusations of
misogyny and yeah, sure,
right,
misogyny and
and
all
harassment
sorts
of
of other stuff too.
whom?
But no,
Harassment of whom?
harassment of female gamers was,
Right.
but they also threw in all sorts of other stuff too, like racism and
Afterwards, yes.
yeah,
After they expanded later, but it did begin with spurious allegations of harassment of women, spurious allegations of sexism in gaming.
yeah, I
It
don't
is
disagree.
gendered. And everything else, like when you look at spurious accusations of other isms, racism, ableism, homophobia. I call them isms and phobias. You get accused of being infected with the isms and phobias, right? All of the isms and phobias are based on a hierarchy of victim points, I guess you could say, a hierarchy of victim cred, victim experiences, historical victimhood that um, a lot of people would refer to it as the progressive stack, right? And the progressive stack is made up of um, race victimhood, ability victimhood, um, sexuality victimhood, like alternate not straight sexuality victimhood, gender identity victimhood. But at every level of the progressive stack, we are told that women are the bigger victims because whatever other victims they have, it's victimhood based on having freckles only on one side of your face, ugly freckle victimhood. Women with ugly freckles have it worse. Feminism is always there to do that, and it always. So let's say there's some legitimacy, for instance, to victimhood of ableism, like where society is designed for the majority. That's going to be the way things work because it's when you create something and you're creating it as a team. Most of the people on the team are going to be um, capable, and they're gonna work toward what they would have expectations of, who's going to use it and everything. And you have to ask people to think about various disabilities before you get them to create uh, pathways in for people with disabilities that maybe can't go upstairs and stuff like that. And our society's bent over backward to do that. I work with people with disabilities, and I've noticed you really notice these days when you go someplace and it's not handicap accessible. Whereas um, 40 years ago, you would really notice if you went someplace and it was handicap accessible, right? So we made a lot of progress on that. So that victimhood isn't all illegitimate, and there's been discrimination against people on the basis of their disabilities and everything. Um, but the idea that women with disabilities have it worse than men with disabilities just because they're women is bullshit, and that gets precedence. Then you end up with, well, we're gonna have this program to use, let's say, games to help people with certain types of intellectual disabilities improve their performance in task completion in a way that helps them have a job, earn money, um, be a little more independent than they were before. Uh, Grifters like Anita Sarkeesian and other feminists will latch onto that and say, well, we have to have a special segment just for women. Otherwise, women are not included. Well, yes,
What's
they are. Everybody, the term everybody is inclusive of women, right? And that is one of the issues with respect to every area of life, including gaming.
what do you want to have happen?
What
in
do I want to have
response to these
happen?
people?
Well, I'd like to see spurious allegations in general be viewed with more skepticism, both by the public and by the business world. With GamerGate, when we got involved, part of what we got involved to do was, point out just because spurious allegations are made doesn't mean that you should be shut down, right? And with the movement that GamerGate ended up becoming, our involvement, a lot of us, like me personally, I got involved as a lifelong gamer, looking at all of a sudden there's all these young women talking about how gaming isn't a female friendly environment and going, what gaming environment are they involved in? This is a lie. This is a spurious allegation. I'm going to contradict this.
Well,
I'm going to call bullshit on it.
do you think that there
And
are no issues though when it comes to? I'm not. I mean, issues is a weird way of framing it. It's sort of leading. But do you think that there's not a phenomenon that occurs where female gamers will get harassed over voice chat more than male gamers, or in a different way?
well, what phenomenon do you think exists? Like I've never
People
experienced
making
anything like
lewd
that.
sexual comments uh, over voice chat.
Guys don't make lewd sexual comments at each other because, like, the guys I've always hung out with did.
I mean, they they might. Um, I don't know.
So, for instance, let me put it this way, right? You're in a activity and it's competitive and you um, are shit talking back and forth, and you say something and the guy says back to you, "Suck my dick," right? You're not going to take it necessarily the same as a woman might take it, but it's not a different statement. He didn't respond to you that
I
way
don't think
because
I
of your
would buy
gender.
though. I don't know if I would immediately believe though that interactions between men and women in games is always not is completely the same. I don't know if I'd immediately believe that. I wouldn't like believe the
Well,
opposite
of
without seeing
course,
like
it's
good
not
evidence,
completely
but
the same. Women don't behave the same as men because women don't have the same internal monologue as men. We are not equal doesn't mean identical, right? We're equal in value as human beings. Like just at the start of life, equal right to liberty, equal right to the pursuit of happiness, right? But then there are cultural differences, and then there are also biological differences. Like for instance, men's tear ducts change in adolescence to where it actually becomes harder to trigger tears in a man than in a woman under the same type of circumstances as in adulthood. Now, it doesn't mean men don't cry, and it doesn't mean that men should be shamed if they do, but it does mean that shaming them for not crying, for instance, is sexist, right? But that's one thing. That's a biological thing, and there are emotional differences between men and women because of that, where women may often have an easier time identifying their emotions and expressing them in ways that result in empathy and compassion from other women and from men, where when men express their emotions, a lot of times women don't understand what they're expressing. Other men will, but they're not doing it the same way as a woman. A woman might cry for hours and hours because her father died. A guy might take his father's last project and complete it to the best of his ability as a way of mourning his father's death. And it's not necessarily always gendered like that. I'm in the process of doing something like that with my dad's his life's work, and it's helping me quite a bit. But a lot of women need to discuss and um, talk ad nauseum about their feelings, and a lot of men are uncomfortable with that. So there's a lot of differences. So when you say men are going to interact differently and do things different than women, it doesn't necessarily make men wrong for doing things differently than women. And it doesn't necessarily make the men the bad guys in the interaction. And it's not misogynistic for men to have a different way of doing things than women. And
So
when there are women joining in with an existing environment, so gaming group, you know, Tables and Terrors. Let's say there's a gaming group called Tables and Terrors, and the guy that runs the gaming group is 40 years old, and he's been a gamer since he was 18, and he's had various people come in and out of his group, and the group has always done things the same way in terms of the bigger rule set and what types of games they choose to play and what kind of speech is okay versus not okay in that environment and so on. And there have been men and women, boys and girls in the gaming group, and it's been just fine. And then Susie Q, gender studies graduate, comes in and wants to be part of the group, but she objects to several of those rules. And it's based on her feminine sensibilities. It's based on her presumption that it's misogynistic to have that rule set, or it's misogynistic for them to disagree with her about that rule set. Does that make them the bad guy if they don't change everything? Does that make him the bad guy if Tables and Terrors suddenly doesn't become Tables and Trees because that's what she wants?
So are you familiar with Destiny drawing the Venn diagram, where he traditionally, 200 years ago or whatever we could say, throughout probably most of civilization or most of history,
Mm-hmm.
people viewed the differences between men and women as being two Venn diagrams with 5%, 10% overlap, just barely overlapping each other, otherwise basically different species.
No.
Then, well, you'd say different species, or you could say basically completely different animals. You could say.
No, I mean, you asked me if I was familiar. No, I'm
Okay,
not.
but as we've learned and we've opened more opportunities up for people to live the lives that they want to live, we've realized that the differences between men and women, the Venn diagram is much closer, and there are differences between these two groups. Um, but for the most part, like men and women aren't super drastically different, and there can be differences in terms of like men are on average stronger, right? Men are on average more likely to enjoy things like objects over people and people over objects for women, advice, etc. There can be differences, but the differences in terms of like overall human psychology of how we can expect reasonable actors to behave and want things that they would want from life are going to be like pretty similar actually.
Not quite sure what things you're talking about. Are you talking about wanting the things on Maslow's hierarchy of needs to be
Well,
met?
you could say
Or
that, or you could also
like every living organism that has
not
sapience
just not no,
of
not
any
just
level
not just that
wants
though, but the idea that like, oh
from
no,
that
you can't.
list.
We used to think that, oh, women can't be doctors, women can't be they can't be surgeons, they can't play
Who
video games,
used
I
to think
guess.
that?
Well, society used to think that
Okay, but what evidence is there that society used to think that?
because society didn't allow women to become doctors.
Was there a law that you can cite that outlawed female
Probably. I'm not
doctors?
like super familiar with
Because
every law ever made, but certainly
have you
there
seen
was
the
a
post
cultural
going around
attitude
on
in
Twitter
society.
showing that?
There
Have
was
you seen
certainly
the post going around on Twitter showing that there were female doctors well before people thought there were?
what, the 19th century you're talking about?
18th, maybe even 17th. I have to look it up,
And
but like
extraordinarily small numbers, and society did not
it
want women
was.
to be allowed to do this by and large.
I was gonna say that they didn't have anybody stop them from doing it. They were just the only women taking an interest. They
Oh,
were the
there's
only
no
women
shot,
trying to do
Hannah.
it.
There's no shot.
There's like
Wait. Hang on.
who's
Who?
stopping them?
Anita
Who is stopping
Sarkeesian.
them? Who is
Anita
the
Sarkeesian is stopping. Is, but like your view is that Anita Sarkeesian is stopping the game developers from making the games that they want because she has a lot of influence and that they're afraid if they don't hire her as a consultant, then they're going to get like bad articles written about them in Kotaku. And like you think this is
and
like a
that
horrible,
that was
horrible attack on
actually
artistic freedom.
demonstrated though. Like
but
that
like,
is actually
but like the
demonstrable
various
that there were those articles. Can you show me something? Because feminists have made that claim for a long time. But then when you go back and you look into history, there were women in business, there were women in medicine, there were women in every area of society that feminists have said women couldn't do, right? The only thing that you couldn't do as a woman historically was simultaneously depend on a man to support you and be considered independent financially, economically,
oh, and a whole host of other
and
things too, like not vote, not join the military, not serve on
uh,
juries.
there that wasn't even as cut and dried as people think. Actually, there in either the United States or Britain, there was a small window of time when um, the vote had been taken away from women, but women voted before that time period, and women voted after that time period, even though they didn't do the same things that men did to get voting rights. And in the United States, all of the states out west came in with women's voting rights already intact. The states in the east had women voting in everything but national elections. New Jersey even let illegal citizens vote, illegal
Well, at
aliens, not illegal
various
citizens,
point of
for a long
times.
time.
Obviously,
Right.
history moves, right? It's not we're not stuck at one
Well,
point
that's just
forever.
it. It gets talked about in black and white terms as if women were actually like kept in some sort of cage of regulation that applied only to women, and in ways that were unique and in ways that were universal to women, and it's not true.
I think in most for most of our history, men also have been oppressed. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
no, I
I
don't.
don't like the term
I
oppression,
mean,
but
like it's a
actually,
weird way of, but men in society also did not have considerable say or influence over the affairs of state. You could say.
right. In fact, men had to fight for voting rights, and it started with lords
But
and
I do want
landowners,
to
basically,
I
and
do
so
want to
on.
point
So I mean, it wasn't something,
like
but
so but like the game developer who faces this pressure from feminist frequency and
this network from the feminist network with
from the whole
yeah,
all of feminism and journalism and all these different groups of various different competing not competing but aligned actors in this case who have a vested interest in seeing feminism succeed in gaming in your view, like this has a negative impact on the game developers and their ability to create the games that they want to make. But like,
right, and on the players as well.
couldn't we apply like that same standard though to like the 18th century woman who wants to become a doctor? Like surely she's going to face like a number of different obstacles, and so would a man too. But like probably some of
But
those
it's not
obstacles are going to be
coordinated.
related. Some of those obstacles are
That's
probably going to
just
be
it.
related to her gender too, right?
It's not coordinated in the same way. Although the coordination of feminism is a response to the belief that it was. But there's not a law that says you can't go to school. There are other factors involved. For instance, so let's say you run a business where you provide training for people, and they go out into the world to do the jobs that you've trained them to do. To get people to want to come to your company, because colleges are companies, they're training companies basically. To get people to want to come to your company, there has to be some level of prestige involved, where you know that if you have this company name, Harvard, as opposed to community college X, that more people are going to want to hire you, and when you walk into an employer, they're going to be like, oh, this person has Harvard training, I'm going to pay them more, or I have to pay them more to get them to come here so they don't go to somebody else who's going to pay them more, right? But what if a percentage of the people that you train just take the degree and use it as a feather in their cap and never go do the job? Will that promote your business?
Well, no, but I'm not sure how that's especially relevant.
So men had to go out and work, right? Men didn't have the option as a part of their gender spectrum of choices to necessarily expect someone else to support them financially in adulthood. So if a man invested in a degree, the university knew that he was going to use that degree for a career, and they would be able to, rely on, this man has this degree, and he's going to have that up on the wall in his office or whatever, and people are going to see that this graduate from their university performed, this way in the world, and they would be able to note a pattern of that. All right, but throughout history, at least industrial history, women have had the option of not having to do that, like not having to, like you might spend money on a degree, and then you have babies and you decide you don't actually want a career, or you spend the money on a degree, but then you change your mind and you decide you want to do something else. So maybe you have a degree in medicine, but you also took 7 different languages and you want to be a translator instead, and so you're not a doctor, or you haven't written a book, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, and it's not so much that it was necessarily a common behavior, but there is much less guarantee that a woman is going to represent the university in a 20 to 40-year career as a practitioner of whatever they get their degree in. So you had, and this is actually a behavior that women do, and it's they don't have to use their education that way, and it's not so much a character flaw as a condition. You could be taken seriously saying, "I'm a homemaker. That's what I do," and that's it. And especially as you go farther back in time, and being a homemaker didn't just mean, tossing the laundry in a machine and tossing the dishes in a machine and then waiting for them to get done cleaning. Or the washing machine required a lot more work, or there was no machine, and so on. Being a homemaker involved a lot more manual labor, and was a lot more time consuming historically. And as we developed in the industrial age, and being a homemaker became less labor intensive and less time consuming, you saw it become a more frequent thing that women in the economic classes where they weren't working because their family was poor, um, wanted more involvement in the workplace, more career involvement. And, their kids would go to school and they would actually have time to work. In in the 70s, you started seeing universities open up more, to where now that there were quotas in universities. So you'd have, if you had 100 seats in the School of Medicine, they might have more than half of those seats, maybe even more than 3/4 of those seats reserved for men, because they knew that if a man got a degree, he would go out and practice medicine and he would have a career in medicine. Um, and then women could still occupy seats. There was no uh, law or policy that said no women could study this. But then you had, in the United States, you had Title IX, which was designed to get rid of those quotas. And about the same time that Title IX was passed to get rid of those quotas, universities started expanding their areas of study to accept more women because more women were coming out and after they graduated and demonstrating that their career was going to be more than 5 years, that they were going to make a name for themselves, that would come back to the university and direct people, I want to study at that university and be like her, right? So there's not it's not the same as having a group of people just come along and manipulate in order to prevent a company and the company's consumers from having the relationship that they want to have with each other. Is an evolution of how people lived their lives in general and how that related to choices that women made and how society accommodated that set of choices. When women's choices and women's interests started expanding because women had more time and less obligation in their homes to make those choices, um, then businesses started capitalizing on that expanded choice.
Cool.
But
Well,
before that, like that's you understand that that is reciprocal, not um, not manipulative.
I do want to ask because this is actually we're gonna probably wrap things up here. I know you said you only wanted to go about an hour and a half or so,
Yeah.
roughly. I've interviewed a bunch of people, and with the the exception of James Desborough's answer, I think you're the only person to like view things. To be clear, James Desborough doesn't view things in gendered lenses, but he does think that gaming had traditionally. He does mention in his answer about being a gamer that gaming was a traditionally more masculine coded thing, though he doesn't view that as being good necessarily, or bad. He just views it as like a thing that is. Um,
Right. It is
so, but
just a thing that
aside
is
from,
not
but
good or
he
bad.
doesn't make like a huge deal. He's an egalitarian. He's actually like an anarcho communist. He's an anarchist at heart, and
Oh my,
yeah, I guess I am too. But
not a
no
communist
one
though.
else, not an anarcho communist. He's an basically an anarchist, like the culture in a sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're the only person to really bring things up in like these gendered terms of like women as a generalization, not all women, but still you say that. Women as a generalization are invading the hobby, and that's not something that like
Well,
normally the people I talk to about Gamergate talk about, and the only people who say this stuff like that generally are like the anti-Gamergaters who are trying to like straw man our position. So it's like interesting to hear you adopt like that with pride, almost.
I'm not adopting the straw man. I feel like you're reframing what I have tried to explain in terms of the straw man. But the discussion about spaces that are male dominated, and I think that's more of a feminist term, but it's the dominant term in the discussion, so it gets used. But spaces that are more used by men, more the culture there is more masculine than feminine, and you can note that there are significant differences between men and women in terms of interests, even though when it comes to the hierarchy of needs, everybody has the same needs in terms of basic needs and the types of fulfillment. If you generalize types of fulfillment enough, then you can call the sexes identical. But it's not that it's an exclusively male space and women have just broken down the door and invaded. And I don't feel like that's what I communicated. I feel like it was similar to how feminists knee jerk react, um, sort of taken from oppositional standpoint rather than from a standpoint of interest in what I was trying to talk about,
Well, this is
if
why I
that makes
asked
sense.
follow-up questions. So your position is more nuanced, though. Like it is your view,
Mhm.
though, that they are coming in and that they are demanding changes, and they being women as like a class of people, albeit you
No,
say, well, you
no,
say you later said feminists, but you did say women in the beginning.
no. But it's women with the feminist viewpoint, and it is both women with the feminist viewpoint and people on behalf acting on behalf of women with the feminist viewpoint. And the fact that I pointed out, that there were those of us who were involved in gaming, tabletop gaming, and video gaming prior to that. And although I don't have the time to dedicate to video gaming like I used to, the older you get, it seems like the more things you end up like doing that take up your leisure time. But I don't understand the disconnect here. Given the fact that I'm talking about it from the standpoint of a woman who was part of the culture before this happened
So
and had pointed out that, this new class of women that came in, um, when they started getting involved, they acted differently than the rest of us, and they sort of shit on us as, as if we had not been there, and they were something special for being girls. And that was not a thing for us before. Like, you just did the activity, you were part of the culture, you were part of the environment, and all of a sudden now you have this "I'm God's gift to gaming because I'm a girl" thing coming in, and you have to change everything to suit my sensibilities or I'll leave, and you're a misogynist if I leave. Like, that's not claiming all women or claiming a population of women invading. That's discussing a particular type of female behavior and a particular subclass of women in behaving in that manner. And I just don't understand the disconnect. How you translate that into all women.
I didn't say all. I don't think at any point, but you do view it as a clash of the genders, right? In terms of this, like you do, this is how you started. Like people can go back and look at how the conversation started, and I think
Yeah,
that
I do
they'll
view it as a
see.
class of the genders,
Yeah,
but not as I don't view it as a class of the genders as in terms of like there's one side is male and the other side is female. It's one side is masculine and the other side is feminine. One side is um I guess normal and the other side has the feminist victim mentality. And so I suppose you can take offense at it, but
oh, I don't.
it's
I'm tough with
not.
everybody. I don't care. Like I'm tough with everybody. Like if you watch all of my interviews, but I also wasn't planning on interviewing me. I thought you were interviewing me today.
But I didn't call you to interview you. You
I
called
reached out to
me.
you. I reached out to you and said, "Do you want to interview me
Yeah.
for your podcast?" I thought I'd have to go
I've
back and look at
never
the
had
exact
any
wording.
like that's yeah. They're really strange, actually.
I'm a very strange person.
Yeah, sorry. It just like that, and that really wasn't something I didn't understand that from the communication at all. I mean, I've had a lot of people reach out to me to interview me, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me with stories that they thought I might be interested in covering. And then I've invited people on to talk about those or asked to interview people, but I've never like I think you're the only person that's ever contacted me and asked me to interview them.
Yeah, I'm doing sort of like a mini media tour of the book. Not really, but as I work on the book, I'm asking people to interview. So it was December 21st. Do you want to interview me on HBR? I ask.
Okay. I honestly I really missed that.
No big deal though, because like I think I did want to interview one of the MRAs and probably one of the Honey Badgers too, especially since you were at Calgary Expo. Though we didn't really get to talk about that too much.
No, and I will go back to that. When we were kicked out of Calgary Expo, the instrument that was used to kick us out, the social instrument that was used to kick us out was rape apology.
I thought they accused you of harassing a panel.
They did, but the allegations of harassment, not only were debunked, but they were debunked undeniably. When we went to court, the reason that Hinkleman gave when he testified in court, like he talked about the social media storm, which was like 20 Twitter complaints, which is not really immediate. I've had bigger storms than that in a single Twitter thread discussing an issue, where I've had hundreds of angry retorts from people in one thread. But like all you have to do to have that happen is talk about abortion on Twitter, and you get all kinds of discussion going. But yeah, that was and the complaints on social media, they were talking about rape apology. He grilled me. He was the one doing the questioning at the end of the case in Calgary Expo, at the end of the hearing. When I went up to testify, he grilled me on the question, and I'm not going to be able to word it exactly because it was so convoluted the way he asked it. But it was, have you ever, and then like 5 or 6 modifiers, maybe possibly ever said anything that might have been remotely related to. I remember the phrase related to in it, and remotely, and maybe and possibly to a rape joke. And I wasn't sure how to answer that question. Like, I wasn't sure what that meant. Because of all the modifiers he put in that sentence, I'm like, what is he trying to ask? Has he ever if he would just have asked me, have you ever told a rape joke? I would have been able to say, yeah, I've told rape jokes. I have made fun of rapists. That's a rape joke. Right? But he didn't do that. He and so for like 5 minutes, I kept trying to get him to clarify what he was trying to ask me, and narrow it down, because anything, like if I use the word joke in a sentence, I have done that. I have said something that is maybe possibly remotely related to a rape joke because it's a joke. It's about the word joke. That's remotely related, maybe possibly, right? So there again, when we got kicked out, people wanted to simplify it to harassment, allegations of harassment. People wanted to simplify it to, we got kicked out because we were involved in GamerGate. People wanted to simplify it to, we got kicked out because we were on the wrong side of that one argument. But do you know what the alleged harassment was?
At the time, I knew. I don't know now.
There was a comic panel called Women into Comics. And the premise of the panel was that the comic book fan community and the comic book industry is not female friendly, and that there must be a way to make it female friendly so that girls can be comic book fans and girls can draw comic book characters and become writers for comic books and be part of the industry and so on. Women can be part of the industry, right? Which implies that there were no female comic book fans, and there were no females in the industry prior to the entry of these feminist types that have these types of panels, right? The implication is that women were excluded up until this point, and at this point, women are becoming part of it, and they're having to force their way in. or they're having to squeeze their way in. When in fact, like there's always been comic books that have appealed to women and girls. And there's always been women and girls who have taken an interest in comic books that weren't designed specifically to appeal to one gender or the other. I used to have a huge collection of I had access to used comics at a bookstore in my hometown, Hammer's House of Horror. I had a bunch of those comics, and I had a bunch of like their Scream and Eerie and all that. Like I wasn't into the superhero ones, right? I was into the scary comics and stuff like that. And Allison was a comic creator. She was there selling her comic, and like this is something that I don't know if everybody that was involved knows, but that was the panel. So the question was asked, if I remember right, it's why do men not do something that these feminists wanted, or why do men do something that these feminists don't like? And Allison asked if she could answer that question, if she could field that question. And it was essentially, the question was framed as a question, but it was a statement that was an allegation against men. But Allison gave a very well-rounded, very non-offensive answer, and a great discussion occurred around it. But it wasn't a feminist-friendly answer. It didn't promote the feminist victim narrative. It didn't promote the allegation of sexism against men, or of men keeping women out of comics or any of that. So they didn't like it, and we didn't know until later, but Sam Maggs, the editor from the Mary Sue, approached the panelist about this later, and she hadn't complained. She hadn't objected. There hadn't been any conflict until Maggs approached this woman and began talking to her about it. And then after she talked to Maggs, then there was a complaint. And then it got treated as harassment, right? And it was combined with the 20 complaints on social media that we heard about in courtroom and everything, which referenced we had a poster of a sloth in a bathrobe, which was kind of making fun of the an aspect of the Bill Cosby story, and it was an aspect of the story that you don't really it's hard to take seriously. And we had talked about it on an episode of our show. So they had a picture of that, and they're going off about that and some other things, and that's what they kicked us out for. Like really mild stuff, honestly, because there were similar things throughout the expo that they didn't find objectionable because we didn't do it. But to act like the gender issues involved were not present is just, it's not an honest representation of the whole controversy. I mean, it's like it's a knee-jerk denial, and to be fair, that people who oppose the GamerGate movement, the recognition of the dishonesty in the journalism and the use of social justice as a shield against criticism and so on, like that, they tried to make it out like it was only about that, and like it was about that in a way that was dishonest, unfair, and unjust. And that's false. Right? It's not misogynistic to object to having a group of women's advocates lie about an environment being not female friendly in order to enforce changes that aren't necessarily for women, they're for their ideology. Right? It's not misogynistic to call that lie a lie, and it's not misogynistic to say, no, you can't do that, we don't want you.
Why don't the other people talk about that, do you think?
Because it's been used, the treatment of it as being misogynistic has been used as a bludgeon to try to silence and shame the GamerGate supporters into compliance. Right? You're only objecting to this because you're slut shaming. You're only objecting to this because you hate women. Your real objection is to women in comics. Your real objection is to women in gaming. No, the real objection is to women lying about the environment and calling it not female friendly to usher in politics that use women as a bludgeon.
Well, only the
That
ones they agree
use,
with.
huh?
Only the ones they agree with.
Yeah, well, they do use the concept of women as a bludgeon, right? Um, you're not allowed to think this way or do this thing or say this thing or feel this way or have these boundaries because if you do, you're
But you
misogynistic.
think
You're
this
taking
is a
something from
woman's thing,
women.
though, right? It's an ideological thing.
Well, it is a woman's thing. It is an ideological thing and a woman's thing. You can't achieve the same thing with men and masculinity. You can't make an environment change by calling it uh, unfriendly to men
Well,
or
they.
friendly to women only.
I
In
mean,
fact,
like you could make a change environments through a number of different ways too, like throughout history.
but men don't get the same response at all. And
Well,
trying to use your anti-male doesn't get the same response at all because men don't have the same societal compassion. Society is not as focused on the welfare of men as it is on the welfare of women. And that's whether it's right or wrong, it's an exploitable truth. And the politics of feminism is designed to exploit that truth. So it is a woman thing, not in that it is a characteristic of women as a population, but it is a female specific thing. There is no power in saying you're hating on men. Stop it. There's no power in saying this is a male unfriendly environment. Change it. Right? But there is power in saying you're excluding women. You're misogynistic. Stop it.
did you know that
Do you
the
see what I mean?
Christ-centered gamer was kicked out of Calgary Expo too?
Who?
Christ-centered game. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh yes, I didn't hear the first thing that, but yeah, he contacted us.
Who, Cheryl Gress or was it Williamson?
Gosh, I didn't know there were two, but
Well, Cheryl Gress is the founder. I'm
okay,
interviewing
no, it was
her like a week and a half, but
Williamson. It was
Williamson was
Cheryl.
the.
Cheryl's no, we were contacted by Williamson. I'm pretty sure. Just briefly on social media, and I looked into that story too, and it was fairly similar. Like they were, um, yeah, they were basically kicked out over ideological differences.
Yeah, apparently I did a video about it on May 26, 2016 too. I
Mhm.
think I also interviewed Mr. Williamson. Um, I also interviewed someone from your convention, from Calgary Expo when you went 2015, and I
Yeah,
interviewed Paul Dulong, who was a witness who testified that you guys were innocent.
yeah,
I don't know if he
yeah,
testified in the
and
trial or not, but he would testified
no,
on
no, no.
YouTube. On YouTube.
No, in fact, we we didn't have we did have some witnesses that came and testified, but we didn't have a large spectrum of witnesses, and one of our witnesses was actually kept from entering the country to testify. So That was interesting.
Was there anything else? Do you want to repeat your last point so I'm not dodging it?
Which you mean about the
Oh, that men. So yeah, that men and women
about
have different like skill sets that they would use to try and control an environment. Like men would be
yeah.
more violence or the threat of violence, whereas
Well,
women would utilize social rules like the
I
idea
don't
that oh you should be nice to
necessarily
women.
I don't necessarily espouse the idea that men use violence and threat of violence
Okay, you didn't say that.
more than women, but
That was more me. But
yeah, because honestly, I've seen men have more success with diplomacy. I will trade you factor X for factor Y, whereas violence or threat of violence seems to create longer conflict, if that makes sense. But women will use, I, I would almost call it social assassination. Um, like, and it's not that men never do that. I mean, mudslinging in politics can get pretty heated, right? And politics, there's a lot more men involved in politics than women, and the history of politics involves a lot more mudslinging in between men. But women have one dirt clod, I guess you could say, that they can sling that men, uh, in terms of social acceptance, do not, and that is gynocentrism. Gynocentrism is a dominant focus on women's welfare and women's interests in society. So, for instance, um, there's a taboo men face and boys face against hitting women and girls that is not reciprocated. We don't face the same social shame for being specifically targeting men and boys with violence as men and boys would for specifically targeting women and girls with violence. Like everybody has a certain level of social shame around violence, unless there's something unusual about their local culture. But even playful violence where men will like punch each other in the arm or they'll wrestle and stuff like that. You can't do that with a girl, right? And it's based around the fact that on average, men are bigger and stronger, have more endurance, thicker bones, can take more and so on. But it's still a difference, right? And so our society is more protective of women, and our society is more caring toward women. There's a lot more support for initiatives to promote women's welfare or protect women from adversity like abuse or starvation or being exposed to the elements and so on. And so that's an exploitable condition in politics. You can get things done in politics by saying women will benefit easier than you can by saying men will benefit. And where that applies in terms of games and gaming, comics, uh, and, the sad puppies controversy, which we also looked at, which was in terms of fiction writing, science fiction writing, and probably in other areas of writing as well.
well, can you
If you want
explain the sad
to,
puppies thing real quick?
oh gosh, I got to go back and relook at that.
We can do a separate interview on that sometime. I'd like to
Yeah,
talk about it.
because I'd have to go back and find the materials, but it was a very similar situation where mm, uh, a a contest was being manipulated, and like social issues, gender issues, and social justice issues were being used as a shield against criticism of the manipulation of the contest. And actually, they were also, if I remember right, part of the reason for the manipulation. So it's or they were the excuse. Like people are more deserving of winning this prize for doing a great job of writing if their opinions match up with the opinions of a certain group of people. So it's not really about performance; it's about popularity at that point. And that when we looked at that, it was we even talked to some of the people involved. and did an episode where they came on Honey Badger Radio and told their story and explained what was happening to them, and it was all very similar in terms of that like a Mott and Bailey. We just want to be included. Oh, and by the way, our politics are now in charge of your hobby, and if you don't like it, you're a misogynist. So like that's basically the formula.
Cool. Awesome. I just
Does
added the.
that make sense?
Oh, I already knew a little bit about it. I just wanted to see what you thought, because I'm thinking about covering that topic in the future.
Okay. Well, maybe we've had so many shows, like, I've had
I've already
difficulty
found it.
finding some of
We've
our
got
old
2
stuff. Oh,
episodes
good.
about it.
It's
Polcast
not one of the ones that's
77
hidden.
and Nerd Revolt
Yeah.
27.
Yeah.
Actually, you have a couple others too. It looks like. Well, one's a highlight
Yeah.
reel, and then one is GamerGate 11, Sad Puppies.
Yeah.
Actually, that might not be related. That might just be a title that. Oh no, Brad Torgerson's there.
No, no, no. Yeah, I was gonna say Sad Puppies. They kind of happened at the same time. In fact,
And Sarah
one
Hoyt.
of the things that yeah, one of our most viewed posts on the Honey Badger Brigade blog. I wrote an article called "Social Justice as a Social Justice Journalism is a Social Justice War Game." Was part of the title. I can't remember the whole title. I wrote this in like 2013 or 2014, so it's been a while. But it was basically about how uh, if um, if social justice warriors are going to start ordering people around in the hobby, the people that have the most power to say no are the ones that can't be shamed because we're already unpopular. We're already socially awkward. We've already got 10-foot pole marks all over us. And so you can't you can't threaten somebody with unpopularity if it's already a fact in their life, right? And you can't tell people that they have to pretend to like something and go out and pay for it and fund it if they are already, um, suffering from the thing that the consequence that you threaten them with if they don't do that. And that article was referenced, I think, in the Epoch News by one of the writers involved in the Sad Puppies controversy. And we usually had stuff that had 4 or 5,000 views. That was an exciting number, and we had 10,000 on that article overnight, and we're like, where the hell did this come from? And that's why. And that's kind of how we heard about them too. It was like, besides the fact that it was starting to get discussed a little bit on Twitter, I started looking into, who's this guy that linked to this article that got all these views? Like, what's going on with them? Obviously, there's a discussion taking place, or they wouldn't have all come to see what I had to say. And that sort of like it's funny because you had like the first thing was actually that I saw anyway was Elevator Gate in, I want to say, 2011, and then the Sad Puppies thing had sort of started happening about that time, and we didn't know about it. And comics were under attack at the same time, and that was being discussed a bit on Reddit. And gaming was starting to see the social justice used as a shield, and in particular, feminism being used as a shield against criticism of similar attacks. And then the Zoe post happened, and the Gamergate controversy, the whole discussion exploded in 2014. So for me, I look at this as a thing that had been evolving slowly over time, and then went on fast forward in 2011, and shot forward exponentially over the course of the next 3 years, and exploded into an entire spectrum of discussion about, can you use allegations, spurious allegations of misogyny and being infected with isms and phobias that are all underpinned by and misogyny. Like the phrase and misogyny, because in each of those, there's the presumption that women have it worse, and women need extra support and extra accommodation. Uh, like that, all of that happened at the same time, and it all had that same theme, and it was all um, kind of interrelated in terms of where it was coming from and what was causing it. So a lot of people that were involved in the Gamergate controversy, that were Gamergate supporters, that were um, looking for honesty in journalism and in the type of contest running and everything, uh, sort of see it from a perspective of their encapsulated discussion around games and gaming. But it was a wider phenomenon, and it was uh, definitely a gender gendered phenomenon as well. Does that make it make more sense when I
No, no,
explain it in terms of yeah.
I don't think that there's zero gendered components to Gamergate. I think that that's obviously not true. I think that Gamergate, if the fact is Gamergate touched upon so many different aspects of our society and life
Yeah.
that it had like minor impacts on a huge number of different topics and like maybe a couple of areas where it had major impacts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, for one thing, like getting the Federal Trade Commission to change
Yeah,
policies
that actually
on
was Gamergate.
like
I
yes.
Operation UV. I knew of UV. I didn't know how successful it was though. But apparently, I just looked up. I have some sources on this. Go ahead. You said, but
Yeah, getting them to change policy by being polite. It was one of the best things. Like I was excited watching that happen and being part of that, being one of the people writing to them and everything, and making points about consumers' rights and having an honest business relationship, and that was great. And I was able to add things as a person who has been part of a business as well, that it's important to commerce in general, that businesses are honest with their consumers, and that includes businesses that do advertising. I've got experience in multiple facets of the environment this controversy takes place in. I was a photojournalist for about 20 years for a small newspaper, and I worked in other areas, aspects of the newspaper business. I did ad paste up. I was involved in a smaller newspaper for a short time, and I was involved in ad sales and ad design. And so I can look at it from the perspective of a one-time advertiser, as a from the perspective of a one-time journalist, from the perspective of a consumer, from the perspective of a gender issues advocate, from the perspective of a gamer. And um, when I see people shying away from some of the issues involved because the other side has used spurious allegations to color those issues as verboten or an attack, rather than a boundary, then I end up, that's an area that I have to touch. Right? It's like the sore spot, and I'm that person that touches the sore spot, and so I know it kind of it scares some people to have that discussion, and it kind of felt like it scared you to have that discussion, or upset you to have that discussion. But
no, I
the fact is,
disagree with you. I think that I disagree with you framing things in this way, the way you did in the beginning. Whereas you make generalizations about women, but I would say the same thing if you were making generalizations about men or about black people or white people or whatever. or gay people.
My generalizations turned out to be right, though. Once you started to understand what they
Actually, I
were
don't know if your
about.
generalizations are right. I don't think it is like the case that like most women are like these shrieking harpies who are like constantly
Well,
trying to
I didn't
use
say that.
offense. No, but like that's basically your view, right? That they
Well,
are
no.
using these that they are using the that basically that they
It's telling me
that
that you're.
most women are using this
Uh,
feminine communication style to try and bully men in men's spaces. That most
I
women
don't think
hold this
that
view.
feminists are a majority of women either. See,
Then why would you make the generalization? I don't get it.
the generalization is just a generalization. It's not. People apply uh, all and most to generalizations when it hasn't been stated, when
But
it's
see,
hit a nerve, or when
what's
it's
even the purpose
like
though of you making the if you yourself even don't even think it's accurate, why make it? Other than the
I didn't
troll,
say
which I'm
it's
fine with,
inaccurate.
but
I said your interpretation of it is inaccurate. Like you added you had to add words
okay, let's
to
not
what I
add words.
said
Like
in order
your
to.
view is
Right?
that they're using the feminine communication style and feminine ways of being to try and
No, the
ruin
idea of
gaming.
the idea of
But that's
feminine
not no.
sensibilities,
You
but I
said
also didn't
feminine
say ruin
sensibilities
gaming either.
to drastically change the spaces that men operate in
I
gaming,
don't think I
basically.
said drastically either.
No, but it does have such an impact that the game
But you
developers are
see what I mean, though?
terrified. No, but like your view is though that it's
You're
drastic, right? That the
you,
game
you
developers, these
no,
AAA publishers, are terrified of Anita Sarkeesian because Kotaku might write an article criticizing them. Like that is your view. Yes? Am I wrong?
that's not what I said either. No, that's actually a dramatic oversimplification that excludes part of what I said. Like when I talked about this, I mentioned several other things. I didn't even use the name Kotaku. You did. Like that's what I'm trying to say. When you heard that, I think it scared you because of the spurious allegations of misogyny from anti-Gamergate.
True.
And
I'm also scared that Anita
this is
Sarkeesian's right.
well,
Right? That's what Ninetales says.
but this is the thing. Uh, when you respond out of fear of spurious allegations of misogyny and so on, you end up adding things that weren't part of what I said and leaving things out that were part of what I said in order to make an interpretation and attribute to me a position that is more in line with the spurious allegation that anti-Gamergate made, and then ask me why I've adopted it. And that's not correct.
True. I should have been
Eh,
more careful on how, but I feel like the Kotaku thing's
Right?
pretty fine because
It
it
would
is
be it
because you're
would
talking.
be
It's an
fair to
example of a games journalism publication, and you do think that the games journalism publications and other publications would attack any game studio that didn't hire Anita Sarkeesian that she wanted to be a consultant at. That like that is
I
your
think if
position,
she
yes?
came back
Am I
and
not? I'm
said
not
I
straw
think
manning
if
you,
she
right?
came back and
Yes or
said
no?
something, I you are you asking if I think they would just respond automatically and attack because she didn't get hired?
Well, she obviously is an actor in this scenario, but yes.
I think it's more than that. I think there's a network and discussion that would take place. How do you think the Gamers Are Dead articles happened?
Well, we there wasn't actually the Game Journal Pro list actually, because it's not in there.
Right.
Though there are other concerning factors. There's so many
But
different
how do you think
hypotheses,
it
but like
happened
one of
that
them is
they
actually
all said the same thing? How do you think it happened that they all said the
they a
same
lot of
thing? They
them.
all had the same.
Yeah, again, we'll probably never know 100% for certain.
Do you remember Milo Yiannopoulos publishing the list?
Game
The
Journal Pro, that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
have planning of the Gamersnet articles in there.
No, no, it doesn't have planning, right? But he did
I
demonstrate
wouldn't
that
be
that
super
type of
shocked at all
cabal
if they were. I wouldn't
existed,
be
right?
super shocked at all if there was collusion to plan those
Right.
articles. Though there's also Liana Kirsner, who works in the industry, did say that initially they were going to write the articles and publish them because of the Zoe Quinn situation, but Zoe asked them not to do it. And so they were sitting
I
on the articles until Anita
am
Sarkeesian's video
skeptical.
was critical. That's what she says. I
All
don't
right,
know,
like
but
I'm gonna be. I know,
I would be
but
super
you're
shocked if it were.
referencing a person who said that it was conclusively proved that Allison engaged in harassment and that her video proved harassment.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know if she's. I would have
and
brought
she
that up with her
blocked
if I
us
knew
all
that.
on social media. She blocked us all on social media when we asked her for proof of that allegation. So like when you reference Liana Kersner to me, it detracts from the credibility of what you say.
Well, I'm not saying that she's right. I'm saying that that's one explanation.
I
But
know,
my
but
role in this
and
is very different from the role you have in this, though, too.
right, I understand. But what I'm telling you is like, because you've done this a bunch of times with you brought up Liana Kersner, and I don't really want to talk about her. If you want my opinion on Liana Kersner, my old YouTube channel from before Honey Badger Radio, which is just under Hannah Wallen on YouTube, has a 4 video series responding to her rant about MRAs, and it should tell you everything that everything you need to know about my opinion of her. Which is pretty much cemented by the fact that, like I said, she stated on Twitter that it was proved that Allison engaged in harassment at that panel, and then when she was asked for evidence, she blocked us all.
Yeah,
So
obviously, I can confirm that
like
that's not true. That she didn't. That
right,
Yeah, she
she
didn't
didn't
harass
harass
anybody.
anybody,
Yeah.
but that was it's like I really don't care what Liana Kersner says. It doesn't. It the closest you get to me caring about that is if you attribute something to her, I'm less likely to believe it. And
Well,
I'm
if I
not saying it's
knew,
because she's a liar. It's because I don't feel like she's a good source of information.
well, if I
Like
knew
she's
that
going to be
you and
her opinion.
if I knew that through that, if I knew, well, I don't know what her opinion is on the Calgary Expo thing. I haven't seen it myself. But like, if I knew that if she was opposed to the Calgary Expo thing, as you say, and I knew that, I probably would have brought it up in the interview that I did with her.
Yeah. Um, I can't even go back on Twitter and search for that conversation because I'm blocked.
And now that I've talked about it on in the book, I'm going to probably ask her about it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Because like I specifically she blocked me specifically when I said can you provide evidence. Like that was what she blocked me for, was asking for evidence.
All right, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up then. We'll upload it. I'll probably upload it tonight. I guess it's not super late.
Okay.
Cool.
And, if you want to send me that